All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours, where we answer questions, give philosophical perspectives, formulate and explore arguments, and deep dive into particular topics of your choice. This is a part two revisitation for season two, reviewing Xavier, Renegade, Angel, which is a TV show on Adult Swim. And as crazy and bizarre and gross as season one was, it pales in comparison to the masterpiece? Question mark? Maybe not. That is season two. Season two is very difficult to make heads or tails of this show. I will try to walk through it as best I can. The first 5 episodes are actually very similar in tone to the first in many ways. But then it gets really weird. Really, really weird. And maybe just to make this interesting, because I think there's a danger here in trying to overinterpret what's going on here. This is written by comedians who are trying to be funny. And a lot of what they're making fun of are spiritualists and also philosophers. So the idea that they would be putting in philosophical themes or getting people to think that they've put philosophical themes here, I think they would find that to be very funny and might be a joke to themselves in some way. But I think there's a way you could read this season and look at it not so much to review it, but as to diagnose it. Because there is, especially in the last 5 episodes, 4 out of the 5 last episodes, a sudden decline in coherency and a sort of departure from the tone we were seeing in the other parts of the show. Let me describe this season very briefly. Season 1 was our, heroic anti-heroic protagonist, wandering around from place to place just as this disruptive force of chaos who's gross and retarded, but he thinks he's so wise and so spiritual and has this gift of understanding that he can bring to other people, and he just breaks everything he touches. Well, season 2 sort of carries on that to some degree, but Xavier, we focus a little bit more on Xavier's actual needs and desires. In particular, his perhaps Freudian relationship with his estranged mother, who's, we saw glimpses of as flashbacks in season 1, but who is actually a character in season 2 that we actually get to meet. Maybe. It's everything in the show is a little bit ambiguous, but she seems to be there against her own wishes. We focus a lot more on that. It's a lot more about Xavier himself. In fact, I think my favorite episode was the going normal one. That's where Xavier decides he's tired of being a spiritual helper. He's just going to be normal for a change. And what that results in, ultimately, first of all, the episode is funny because it contains an insult string that is comparable, I believe, to the what we saw in episode 10 of season 1, the Shakashuri blowdown. I think the insult string in Going Normal, where he's just riffing on his coworker in his corporate office job that he winds up is maybe comparable to the self-owning of Shakashiri Blowdown. But his attempt to go normal winds up with him wearing the face of a person he accidentally killed earlier part of the episode. Don't worry about it. Him pretending to be a normal guy, disguised as a woman, disguised as another man, disguised as an overweight black woman, disguised back as his man impersonated self, wearing a costume that happens to, by complete coincidence, that happens to look like Xavier's actual form. and so the what normal looks like in this exaggerated form is wearing so many layers of disguises and personas that it's literally oppressive. So that there might be some kind of commentary in there or something. It's amusing, and then you get episodes like Damnesia U, which, while watching it, gives the impression that that the writers are taking vengeance upon the viewers, and you might be like, why would the writers be taking vengeance on the viewers with this absolute brain trip of an episode? Except they tell you at the beginning of it is implied that there was some sort of video submission contest, and only one person made a submission, and it was of a dog licking up ketchup. So they made that a bad mushroom trip theme of of the episode, and just basically made it as painful as possible with just enough interesting spice to keep your eyes glued to the screen. Very uncomfortable. And this might be one of those like comedy for comedians type things where it's funny because it's not funny or something like that. So what's going on? Why is season 2, with the exception of the first episodes, the first 5 episodes are pretty good and pretty normal. The free range cannibalism one was amusing, where Xavier gets a couple of homeless guys to wraps them up in pigskins so that he can get them into this animal shelter that treats the animals much better than these humans are being treated out in the world. And of course, that doesn't go super great, because he kind of forgot that on the other end of this animal treatment thing, they're treating it's not like pets. They're treating cows and pigs. It's a very hipster establishment. They're giving these animals the best possible life before they get eaten. Well, needless to say, eventually one of the homeless men gets you get the idea. It was a good fun episode. But so what happened in the second half of this? I have maybe 2 ideas as to why season 2 of Xavier Renegade Angel is so different than season 1, and then maybe we can get into talking about if there's any philosophical themes going on here. So my theory 1 as to what happened with season 2. Let me begin it with a question. What is Xavier's type? What kind of character is he? Well, he is a spiritual healer, right? He goes around to try to help people. And we had, that was definitely a type in like the United States. We still have in some cases gurus who think they're, can run around and help people with their magical powers. You got your Deepak Chopra. That's kind of, is he still around? I'll have to look. You got your people like that. But the most prominent versions of those people actually reside in Hollywood. they're actually oftentimes writers. And many writers in Hollywood actually have many of these kinds of spiritual beliefs. They're very like New Age leaning, lots of interest in helping people with love and nonviolence and all that kind of thing. So all of the pretensions that make it easy to make fun of these New Age spiritualists who think they're so helpful also apply to writers, film writers, and so forth. And I think the makers of Team America actually did a very good job of this with the Federal Actors Guild, right? FAG. And it almost seemed like the second season, it felt like the second season could have been the show writers coming to terms with this similarity. Now, you don't want to be a like spiritualist who's trying to help people after you watch season 1. But if writers are not so different, you wouldn't want to be that either. So what if you're a writer who's making fun of yourself in this way? You have to separate yourself. You have to break away from any kind of laughable or ridiculous pretensions that you're helping people with your writing, with your film. You're saving the world with your film. That's ridiculous. And you should find that ridiculous. To not find that ridiculous would be naive, right? And so it almost felt like the breaking of the fourth wall, and maybe a few walls beyond that, that we see in especially Damnesia Vu and Damnesia U. This is mostly Damnesia U that I'm talking about. It's such a strange episode that it kind of breaks everything else. It almost feels like the writers are trying to break away from themselves. So almost like they see themselves as Xavier, who's run into like a projected likeness of themselves in their creation, like they've run into a living Rorschach test or something. And they're trying to so they have to self-destruct, right? And basically break the show before it ends, and then that would be why there's only 2 seasons. That's one explanation. Is that a very likely explanation? No, that's probably not what's going on. It's what I kind of secretly hope is happening, but I don't think that's likely. I think what's more likely is that the writers, John Lee and Vernon Chapman, who are talented comedians, probably have other projects going on, and they probably got bored or ran into other budget issues. Maybe it wasn't getting enough interest at the time or something, or they said that this character has run its course. Like, how much can you do with one character? They don't really have a cast of characters or a developed setting at all, really. He's just wandering around various parts of the world. But there's only really one character. Well, one character and his mother. They could maybe introduce characters, but it's already pretty completely built around this one guy. And there's only so much you can do with a show with one character. And they did a lot with him. So, anyways, I think 2 seasons, although many people complain about it being too short, that's probably as long as they could have gone with a show that's built around just one character. Think about like in mathematical terms, if you have if you have a combination lock that has two dials on it, it only gives you, what is that? 10 times 10 only gives you 100 possible combinations. Actually less than that, because you have to eliminate doubles. So like 90-ish possible combinations. If you add a third dial on that number lock, suddenly you have like a lot. It multiplies the possibilities. And shows with lots of characters are like that too. So if you only have one character, you're limited. Anyways, I don't want to beat the dead horse off. Work some Xavier humor in there. So, are there any themes or ideas to this show? Honestly, there might be, but I don't want to interpolate too much. The half of philosophy, philosophy, and I think this is true of literary analysis too. You know, you want to be able to identify patterns. You want to be able to identify, sequences and be able to draw conclusions and stuff. But a highly underrated skill, and this is especially true in literary analysis, is being able to identify a false positive, to identify when something isn't there, even if it looks like it is there. And this has become a much bigger problem, I will say, since Joseph Campbell and Carl Jung have entered the mainstream, largely thanks to Jordan Peterson. And by the way, I like Carl Jung. I like Joseph Campbell. I think they're valuable, especially as tools of literary analysis. However, it is very easy to, with the tools that they provide the reader, it's very easy to spot false positives all over the place, everywhere, and to go a little crazy with that. And part of what the writers of the show are making fun of are those people, right? So, a lot of the themes there are actually not themes that the writers are positing. They're themes that they are alluding to in order to make fun of. But I don't think they're trying to make fun of the themes. I think they're trying to make fun of a certain type of person who, like Xavier himself, sort of half understands a theme and tries to apply it in contexts where it doesn't apply. So the writers are probably fairly intelligent, but I don't think they're trying to work those into this show, with maybe one exception. I do believe that they probably have opinions about Jung and Campbell, probably not good ones, but can't speak to that for certain. But returning to the subject, that maybe there is one theme. What is that one theme or idea? I think, and this is a consistent one, and it's in season 1, and it's also in season 2. It's a consistent theme in almost every episode, and that's the idea of suspicion. Suspicion is most commonly associated with the characters of Freud, Friedrich Nietzsche, and Karl Marx. And suspicion is basically, in formal philosophy, it might be considered ad hominem, but it's applied psychologically anyways, because it's true half the time. And it's basically looking past what people say, the semantic content of their argument, and looking rather to their intentions or drives or how they benefit materially behind it. So it's doubting the sincerity of someone's words, not because they're necessarily lying, because they might not even be aware of why they are not conveying their true desires or intentions authentically. They might be deluding themselves. There might even be a character in this show who's deluding themselves. But this idea of suspicion is a persistent theme in the show. not just in Xavier, but in most of the side characters as well. Which is not to say there aren't a few, good, truly benevolent characters. There's a funny scene where it's the Karma Bionic Lotion, where basically a whole town is full of decent people, more or less, but they're led astray by someone. So, but still, there's a sense of like, I don't want to interpolate here, but very often in philosophies of suspicion, people who are genuinely good, who are like actually good in their heart, are often viewed as naive. Like, even if their goodness is granted, it's like they're good because they're stupid. They're like Boxer from Animal Farm. The horse that works himself to death and is decent because he doesn't understand what's going on. Like that's a sense that's an archetypal character profile you'll often see in stories told in the suspicious filter. Everyone at the end of the day is selfish, and they do things for selfish reasons, and they just try to hide that because they can't face their own true nature. They hide from themselves, as our anti-heroic protagonist does. So it would be interesting to ask the writers if they were thinking about that. They probably didn't put that term to it, but that is a theme that's there, whether they have the words for it or not. And this suspicion is applied especially hard on people who consider themselves to be holy or moral or wise. Someone like Xavier, the Savior. And so is suspicion true? I think suspicion is often useful, but it can often take you to a dark place. I've talked before here about the sort of the dark side of comedy. C.S. Lewis's 4 kinds of laughter really come to the fore here. People who become too suspicious can often give way to flippancy and assuming that someone has bad intentions without ever doing the work of finding out if that's the case. Just as someone who's flippant might assume something's ridiculous without even bothering to make the joke. So I think many comedians fall down this rabbit hole of suspicion very quickly, because it makes for very good comedy when you can find it. When you can find people whose actual intentions very clearly don't line up with their stated intentions. Like, who are you fooling, kid? It's fun to make fun of. Have you heard of Mormon soaking? Look it up if you haven't. But like, the idea that some people might think that there's a loophole in the rules about sexual propriety in Mormonism, it's funny, and it's so in an almost childlike way demonstrates the suspicion that we should have for people's like holy motives or whatever. But if you get into a world where you're a lifestyle where you're constantly writing about that and constantly focusing upon this, that's what the world is going to become. Not because it is that way, but that's because you're constantly seeing all the time, and that can be a road to flippancy. So not to make too much of a moralistic warning about it, because again, it is a funny show, and by the way, suspicion is warranted sometimes. You just don't want to get too poisoned by it. So anyways, that's my the best I can do as far as an analysis or diagnosis of this show goes. It's a very strange show, probably the strangest show I have ever seen. Um, um, maybe that's an honor of sorts. This show is definitely not for everybody. It's not going to be to everyone's tastes. But for a very certain kind of person, you're going to get a kick out of it. It's funny. If you watched and enjoyed Team America World Police, I would say there's a 70% chance you'll really like this show. This is similar kind of humor to South Park, but less wholesome than South Park. If that gives you an idea of the tone of this show. It's pretty gross, pretty rough, but also very, very funny. If you can appreciate that kind of humor. And even if you don't like the humor, if you get through a few episodes, you will at least be able to appreciate the cleverness and the skill. They're very good writers, the John Lee and Vernon Chapman. And I wish them luck in their future endeavors because they've got a lot of skill with this stuff. So anyways, thanks so much for listening to whatever degree this is or can be an analysis of this show that seems to defy or challenge anyone to analyze it. So thanks for listening and take care.